Everybody, this is Rob Keats with the Freedom Report, and we're back today with a very special roundtable. I love roundtables. It's so much fun. We have Daniel Diaz, Executive Director of Citizens for Sound Money, back yet again. Welcome, Daniel. We
Thank you.
have Stuart Englert, auditor, editor, author of the book Rigged, and has a new Substack for the last year that he has been writing on. So if you want to find his content, go over to Substack. And Stuart, what is your Substack officially?
Stuart Englert at Substack.com, I think it is, but if
There
you
you go.
just look up my name and Substack, you'll find it.
All right, and we have a new guest. Very happy to have on Kim Coleman, who's a director of strategic relations for Goldback. That would be these things that I have right here. I actually, Kim, just gave some Goldbacks to my daughter last night for some work she did for me, and these are the new ones Daniel
Nice,
sent me.
nice.
Oklahoma
It's
and
it's like
Florida.
it's like it's money.
I
Yeah,
know.
right.
Doesn't it look like money? But it's got a gold flavor to it. Very special
Ooh,
announcement for Kim as well. She recently was elected as a chairwoman for the new Sound Money Trade Association. Congratulations, Kim, on that.
thank you.
All right,
Got
so
a
we're
lot of
going to
work
get,
to do.
yeah, absolutely. So we're going to get started. We want to talk about gold and silver first, and then we're going to get into what is money and the legislation, all that kind of stuff. But really, we've had a lot of dynamics in the gold market. I'll sum here real quick. Gold after the last 3 years has been in a really a good bull market. The last 18 months, it doubled and did really well. Silver broke through its last all-time high of 50 and stayed there at a weekend close. We thought, okay, we got the breakout. Then came a little bit of a downturn, and I wanted to ask you, Stuart, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think caused that, or what are your thoughts on maybe where it goes next?
Well, we volatility has been the name of the game here in the last couple weeks, and as you mentioned, we went to record highs, and then it dropped off fast, and anybody that's not used to this, their heart had to sink. I've been riding this roller coaster for 20 years, Robert,
Yeah.
so it's nothing new to me. But volatility is used by the markets to shake out the weak hands,
Mhm.
and the stackers shouldn't worry. That's the way I look at it. They're in for the long term. They've got to have strong hands, and they can't let these intermediate or temporary volatility affect their decisions that they make on gold and silver. If you're a day trader, that's completely different. But I'm not a day trader, and so I don't have to worry about that.
So you've been in the long haul, I know, Stuart, on the metals, also the mining stocks. Do you think mining stocks, I know that notice that GDX had doubled in the last calendar year. So we finally starting to see signs of life in the mining. I'm so excited after 3 years of it just being somewhat dead. What are your view on that? Do you think
I've
we're
never
back?
seen the mining stocks do as well
Yeah.
as they did over the last, well, I guess last year. Um, it's been tremendous. My portfolio just ballooned, and I bought some of these stocks back in 19. Let me get this right, 1985, 86, and it's just gone haywire. So I'm looking forward to the future in the mining stocks. I think if the prices stay strong, the miners only have one way to go.
Yeah, I agree with you. What are your thoughts on that, Daniel?
No, I agree. I think that, mining stocks typically lag behind the price of gold and silver, and I think it's just typically when gold and silver is in a bull market, we see mining stocks, sometimes one, two, 3x, maybe more. I remember when Jim was talking about mining stocks with me, he said that the last bull run, you had some mining stocks go up over 1,000%. It's crazy. It could be a few pennies and then it go up to five, six, $7, maybe 10 or more. So it also depends on, demand, which is sky high, and also fundamentals of the company, whether they're mining at a profit or what or not. So, but I agree. I think right now, now this isn't investment advice, but if you're looking to invest in something, take a look at some mining stocks because it's still a good buy. And if you watch the YouTubes, Yankee Stacking, he does recommendations. He thoroughly looks at different companies and he makes recommendations to his audience of different mining companies that aren't on the typical tickers or articles, and he makes recommendations. So just search around, see what you think would be a good buy, and jump in.
What are you thinking about gold and silver with the recent pullback? Do you think that was because it's just, people taking profits there? You think it's normal market movement? You think there's anything to worry about for people that are that are stacking out there and going, wait a minute, we had a pullback in gold like $400. What happened?
Well, the first pullback was because of the margins increasing. They're saying that you need to add 50% more currency into your account to keep your holdings, so people took profits. And the second time it was just similar. It was people taking profits out of their margin contract because they were so in the green. I think it's coming back. I think it's interesting that in the West we look at our at spot price and the value of gold and silver based on futures contracts. In China right now, or a week ago, when an ounce of silver was on $51, $52 here in the United States, it was selling, physical silver was selling for about $128 USD per ounce in China. So I think that the East, and I just read an article today about India. India just pegged silver to gold. It's 10 silver ounces to a gold ounce. So that was brand new. They're not it's going to start next year. So there looks like countries are starting to peg silver to gold now. I think we're going to start seeing moves towards either a Bretton Woods standard or a former bimetal gold and silver standard, because if India is doing it, they're one of the biggest economies and one of the in the second largest country in the world. I think we are starting to see what we've been talking about for a long time, that the world's going to move back to a gold and silver standard, in a sense. In a sense.
What are your views on that, Kim? Since you work for Goldback, I know you become a lot more familiar with the gold industry during that time. What's your view on gold? I know you guys have, again, I'll throw it up again just because they're beautiful. These Goldbacks, this wonderful design of imbued gold into these notes. What's your view of the gold and silver market? Are you thinking that gold's going to do what Daniel says and become some sort of monetary standard, or do you think that people can at least use it in their private lives as actual money?
So I mainly rely on you guys to analyze the markets for me as I'm scaling that learning curve. But Goldback is really seeing a lot of success, uh, and watching what's happened with those markets since I've been here less than a year. But my focus really is on, as people want to engage with precious metals and have the benefits of transacting in gold and silver, that we don't have the government getting in the way. So, honestly, my focus is making it possible, and a much more favorable landscape for people to engage in these markets, whether it's in this physical local currency that we make, or in the investment world as well. So I don't
Yeah.
know as much as you guys do about the markets, but things look really good for us here. So.
It's been interesting, as I became part of the Sound Money movement, when Jim kind of invited me in. I guess we were always a part of it when we were stacking, but now that we're actually trying to make moves and define that, I was going back and looking at the Constitution. Gold, silver is still money. There are some other things done at the federal level to kind of frustrate people actually using it as gold and silver. So I believe that the Fed can use their monopoly on money, to their advantage. And the state always wants to do that. And of course, the people will adopt whatever the state money is because they have to. And it's interesting. We're inviting on somebody from the Mises Institute next week onto the program, who's an expert on Fed policy, who's going to talk to us about, what the Fed is doing and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to keep it just really simple here. What is money nowadays? Is it fiat? Is it gold and silver? Are there exceptions to the rule? Why can't we just use like this is money and call it real money? Why can't we use gold and silver coin? Daniel, what's your view on that? What is money actually? What's the definition of money?
Yeah, so I like using Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations. He basically identifies three characteristics of money. The first is a medium of exchange. Anything can be a medium of exchange, right? This glove can be a medium of exchange. My cats, anything can be a medium of exchange. Cattle, a unit of account. So half an ounce of gold, $100, 100 pennies, half a cat. No, I'm just kidding. Not half a cat. But the third characteristic that differentiates, say, currency, which is what the dollar is, fiat, or anything else, right? Versus money, is a store of value. And the reason is because gold and silver throughout time, an ounce of gold, you could have bought a toga in Roman or Greek times. And you can still buy with an ounce of gold a really nice tuxedo, with a top hat if you wanted to, and a pocket watch, because gold and silver maintains its purchasing power. The dollar doesn't, and fiat currency doesn't. And we can even look back at history. I actually had this debate, and I'm in an Orem. Orems are goldbacks and other gold bills that are produced by the Lorem. I'm in an Orem advocacy group, and there's a person debating saying that the dollar is money, just bad money. I'm like, no, it's not bad money because it doesn't store wealth. I said there's over 6,000 examples throughout human history of fiat currencies, and they've all reverted to their intrinsic value of zero. The term and the definition, what people need to understand by store value, because his argument was, well, if I have $100 bill, I can go buy it today. Sorry, my cats are jumping around. You can buy $100 a day, but that $100 bill 100 years from now, you might only be able to buy a penny's worth of goods. That's the difference. A store value has to be long term so you can pass it on. A goldback, same thing. It's gold. So my definition of money is not just those three characteristics, but gold and silver. Full stop. Nothing else is money. And then if you want to go down the Mike Maloney route and really break it down, there's four more characteristics of money. It's portable, durable, divisible, and fungible. And he defines currency as medium of exchange and unit of account. And it's portable, durable, divisible, and fungible as well, same as money, but it is not a store of value because it leaks, and that leakage is through inflation, through the printing and expansion of the currency supply. Mike Maloney and I adhere to this definition. What is inflation? The simplest definition of inflation is the printing and expansion of the currency supply, because what the free market does, it's very efficient. And when the governments around the world print a lot more currency, me as a business owner, the business owners realize, well, there's a lot of people, they want to spend cash. There's a lot of demand. There's a lot of currency chasing goods. So let's increase those prices. And that's how the prices increase in inflation. They print currency. The free market's very efficient. They're like, oh, people want it. There's a lot of cash. People are paying astronomical prices. And that's why prices increase. So think of prices as a sponge and currency as a pool of water. And as the pool fills up, the sponge gets larger.
What are your
That is a
thoughts
really
on?
big, long definition of what is
Yeah,
of
can
what
you
is
simplify
money.
that for us, Stuart? What
You know,
that's a good definition, but what's your view on that in more simple terms?
Well, I always go back to the Constitution. The U.S. Constitution is the highest law in the land. And according to the Constitution, only gold and silver can be money. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason that Article 1 was put in the Constitution. It's because when the country was founded, the Continental Congress and the states issued these paper notes. They were called Continentals. And they were supposed to be backed by gold and silver, right? But they printed too many of them, and there wasn't enough gold and silver to back them. So what happened to the continental currency? It lost value, okay? That's how the Revolutionary War was actually financed, primarily with this paper currency, okay? Which shows the relationship to paper currency and war again. But the founders and the American people didn't like what happened to the currency. So the founders who wrote the founding documents, the U.S. Constitution, put Article 1 in there to make only gold and silver tender for payment of debts. That's the reason it's in there. And it was wise. And it should be that way today, other than the powers that be and the bankers wanted to issue more credit and collect more money and get richer. And so they went back to this paper. They encouraged the government and got in cahoots with the politicians. And what did they do? They went back to paper currency over time. It was an incremental thing. But all of these statutes and laws and legal tender laws that have been passed subsequent to the Constitution, to me, are subordinate to what Article 1 says in the U.S. Constitution, that gold and silver are money. Is that too simple?
No, I think that's the perfect definition. There are some statutes or laws which cloud that up Daniel.
Yeah.
Can you clear that up for us? And some of the battle when we go out and people are asking us, why do you have to go to the states to make gold and silver legal tender when exactly as Stuart said, it's in the Constitution? What are some of those things that have frustrated us just being able to use gold and silver as money?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that go back to the history of our founding, the Continental, as Stuart was talking about the Continental dollar inflation, and then putting gold and silver in the Constitution, and where Article 1, Section 10 specifically states that states can't coin any money except recognizing gold and silver as tender for the payment of debt. So states can't mint their own coinage, but they can recognize it as gold and silver. And then the Legal Tender Act of 1790, I think it was 95, recognized gold legal tender and silver legal tender with a certain amount of grains. And then that was money. In fact, in 1870, the Supreme Court ruled against Ulysses S. Grant because they wanted to use greenbacks to pay the Union armies. And the Supreme Court essentially said, no, it's unconstitutional. The only thing that's money is gold and silver. Well, then Ulysses S. Grant didn't like that. And then over the next year, he stacked the court with two other justices and overturned the Supreme Court ruling of 1870, and they made greenbacks and fiat currency legal tender. It was Ulysses S. Grant that overturned the definition and interpretation of the Constitution, and that's why today the gold and silver isn't legal tender in and of itself. So that is why we need state laws to make it legal tender. And then there's arguments out there that no, if we just get rid of capital gains and sales taxes, it's effectively the same. That's not true in states like Florida and Texas that have horrible barter laws. If we have no sales tax and no state capital gains in Florida. But the problem is if you barter with gold and silver prior to making legal tender, you don't get the same legal protections as you do if you use fiat currency or the Federal Reserve notes. So what needs to be done, and let me give a quick example. I did a barter transaction. Long story short, he stole the property from me. I had police. They were about to arrest him and issue a warrant. The detective called me. He's like, "Hey, was there any transfer of currency?" And I'm like, no, it was a barter. For every item that he fixed, I'd get for every 10 items, I give him one. He's like, well, I'm sorry, we can't do anything. I'm like, what do you mean? It's over $8,000 worth of product. He's like, but there was no transaction. It's a barter and they're not protected. And that's why legal tender laws are important for gold and silver, because not all states have good barter laws like New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, the argument could be we don't necessarily need legal tender because barters are protected just like Federal Reserve notes. But in states like Florida and Texas, which have some of the worst barter laws, that is why gold and silver has to be elevated to legal tender.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add to that also 1913, the Federal Reserve Act. And if you go back and read Creature from Jekyll Island, or if you go to the Mises Institute bookstore, there are tons of books on this subject by well-respected economists. You know, they made fiat as money, even though it was unconstitutional. And my question is, why didn't the Supreme Court strike that down eventually? The way they did it basically is they waited till a lot of people left for vacation. They did a vote of a small group of senators and House reps and got it passed because Andrew Jackson had been fighting it. Other people had been fighting it, that, you know, a central bank. I think we had a central bank in the 1800s for a bit. Andrew Jackson got it out. Yeah, a couple of times. And then in 1913, it passed. Why, since 1913, has no one really challenged this openly in court and forced it up to the Supreme Court level? Anybody have an idea?
Well, because of that previous Supreme Court case of 1871, where they made greenbacks legal tender,
So
and
it
it
set
was
precedent.
there's a precedent there. So that's how the court system in America works.
I think the states also haven't challenged the federal government because so many of them receive federal funds
Yeah.
in all sorts of ways. So unless the dollar really crashes or loses a lot of value, I don't think the states are going to push back because they receive the windfall of this fiat system.
Yeah.
Kim, what's your view on that? You know, given what we've said here, how important do you think gold legal tender legislation is? Is this the right way to go about it? Or is there another way to go about it? Or what's your view since you've been in the space and been looking at a lot of this policy?
Well, definitely having states recognize gold and silver as legal tender again is paramount. I mean, that is a big focus of the Sound Money Trade Association. That is something that Goldback as a company in the space is really supporting and trying to drive. But I'm not sure if you're ready to go here yet, but there are also threats and opportunists in that space as well. So what we're looking at is a broad definition, a broad inclusion of products that would be recognized as gold and silver. But while we are doing that, we have some folks out there that are trying to carve out a limited space for legal tender that, frankly, it's so counterintuitive to the sound money movement. I don't understand some of these bedfellows that we're seeing right now. And so that is a big focus, again, of both the trade association that is just newly coming together, as well as individual companies watching this going on and wondering why there is an effort to simultaneously say, Florida notably said, let's throw open the door, but then only, narrow it right back up to where there's really effectively extremely limited products in gold that could be considered legal tender. And, one thing we're watching this week very targetedly is a couple states, Ohio, namely Michigan, is there's legislation to make gold and silver legal tender, but only if that gold and silver is transacted electronically and only if it is gold that is held by a governmental agency.
Right.
And that those electronic transfers happen via either the government itself or with a third party provider, payment processing provider. And so only if you play in the government sandbox, only if you're willing to put your gold in a government program, will that gold, and only if it's transacted electronically, will that be considered legal tender. And that's, again, that's so antithetical to the movement. And I'm really not sure that this policy is even well understood by some people who are showing up to committee meetings speaking in favor of it. I don't think they understand some of the limitations of this. So these are really bad policies. And again, the sound money movement built on a foundation of free markets, open markets. And then where we feel like we have fertile ground, we have a really great potential in a policy landscape, but some folks have kind of come in a back door and laid down these highly restrictive anti-free market, moving the gold market into new governmental programs. It's really it's very surprising, very concerning, and typically this is being supported by people who understand free markets. Like they have a policy record of supporting free markets. So I don't know why they're simultaneously saying, hey, there's something that's happening in the gold world that's really positive, and it's the demands are being met viably and well in a already well-regulated system. Nobody's asking for this. So why did somebody say, I have an idea, let's let government take this over? Let me let the government create a new bureaucracy and where the government is going to know your gold and silver transactions. I mean, that's just privacy issue alone. It's not a free market one.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question, Daniel, then I'm going to go down to Stuart because I think this is going to lead into a concern that Stuart had. So it appears as though the government is getting involved to answer a previous concern of Stuart's, but maybe not in the way that we want to. It almost seems like there may have been some misinformation within the movement. Now, granted, the movement hasn't coalesced around like a trade association until now, until we create it. And historically, when I first got in the gold silver space 16 years ago, it was kind of like the Wild Wild West, and it's been operating that way for a long time. Now that Citizens for Sound Money is trying to kind of wrap its arms around it and try to coalesce and work both at a industry level and a policy level to help the movement find its footing, so to speak. but I wanted you to address some recent maybe misinformation within the gold space that came out in terms of what type of money should be, or what type of gold, silver should be allowed to be money, things with gold eagles, silver eagles, that type of thing. Can you kind of address that real quick? And then I'm going to go to Stuart, and we're going to talk about the whole government piece of it, because that's been a concern he's had.
Yeah. So there is a misunderstanding in the movement. Now, the same people who have been pushing one, vendor specific language, and two, language making electronic currency legal tender, they have been pulling back because they realized halfway through this year that that was actually unconstitutional. You can't make electronic currency or representation of legal tender currency or legal tender in the state, because that would be a bill of credit. So when people or companies that come out that have electronic systems are saying that, their electronic currency is legal tender in XYZ state, or they're pushing that, well, that's unconstitutional because that's a bill of credit. What you can do is a state can do what Missouri did. They are recognizing electronic gold and silver as if they were legal tender. They didn't make it legal tender. And they can accept Bitcoin for payments of goods and services and so forth. They just can't declare it legal tender. And that's a very nuance. Putting as legal tender versus is legal tender it is the difference between constitutionality and unconstitutionality. So the Ohio bill does the exact same thing. And we have seen around 30 states with bills that are either vendor specific, where the state chooses one vendor to operate their electronic payment systems, or they want the state to create a depository, contract with a depository, and do private industry services where people can send their gold and silver to a state depository, and essentially compete against other private depositories like Franklin, what is it called? Miles Franklin, or Money Metals Exchange, and so forth.
I mean, this literally, the government becomes the storefront for gold, and that puts your
Right.
local folks out of business. Your big big distributors out of business, skew the
Right.
market.
Oh, and we can see a very recent example where the government does something and effectively kills an entire industry. In Maryland, because of budget issues, they got rid of the sales tax exemption, even though we at Citizens for Some Money with our super PAC pushed really hard last minute. We had 72 hours to try to stop the exemption. And when the law went into effect July 1st, almost all the bullion dealers in the state of Maryland have lost 80% year over year of their sales. I interviewed 𝙃𝙀𝙊𝙒𝙊𝙒, who is one of the owners of Golden Eagle Coin, which is one of the largest bullion dealers in the United States and the largest in the East Coast. And one of the bullion dealers that he usually services this last month has only sold 2 ounces of gold. That's it. He's a small coin shop. It's just him and one other employee. You can't function that way. What there's happening is when the government gets involved and starts meddling in the private sector, it kills industries. And people in Maryland are just taking that 30-minute to 1 hour drive to the other states, because it's, you got Delaware, you have Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Virginia, that don't charge a sales tax on the purchase, sales, and goods, and their businesses have increased 300-400% year over year because the Marylanders are going to other states. So that idea that you can make electronic currency legal tender, I mean, I think it's a nuanced thing that can be corrected by people in the industry, but it's not constitutional. Now, making an electronic payment system and backing it with legal tender, 100% okay. And the organizations that have been pushing that have been changing their language to reflect that. But when you have people who run these systems saying that, I mean, they just need to be corrected, because there is right and there is wrong ways to pass legislation, and one will get the ire of the federal government to bring a suit, and the other won't. So,
All
I
right,
mean,
good point.
tax policy, definitely you can see, tax policy can be impactful, whether it's a sales tax benefit on your car tires or on the gold you buy. But it is a far different cry to have the government take over an
yeah.
industry and become the industry. And that's just not tax policy. That is, I mean, that is a big boot stomp on the private sector.
Yeah. And sorry, and you can ask your question, Rob. And there are people, and look, we as Citizens on Money, I'm a fusionist. The fusionist is on economic issues, libertarian, on social issues, conservative. But there are conservatives who are not libertarian when it comes to the free market. They believe in implementing their personal ideological and religious beliefs on the free markets. And some people just trust the state. I'm sorry, I don't trust any government. I'm a Cuban, first generation Cuban American. I've seen what the governments do and to steal the freedom of the people. And you can talk to anybody from Eastern European countries or even Greece where they had to fight the communists in those countries. I don't trust the government. I don't trust the state. I trust the free market because there's an incentive for the free market players to not screw over the people because they'll go to prison for a long time. That's not the case with the government because the government has the sole monopoly on coercion. And that's the government, because they have that coercive power, can do whatever they want when it comes to tax policy or even the free markets. We saw that with the Soviet Union. We see that with North Korea. We see that with Venezuela. When the government gets involved and nationalizes the private sector, which effectively is kind of what the state is doing, right? They're nationalizing the bullion depositories and having the state run them. Well, you're going to kill an entire industry, and the state has never effectively run a market. That's central planning. So even if you do have a private company running it, there's no competition. They can run at, what is that term where they can lose money because they're being funded by taxpayer dollars. They can outprice the market because, well, they don't necessarily need to make a profit because they'll constantly get funding from the state. So
Yeah,
I think
basically, it's kind of
So-
a backdoor way of doing a price control, because you can set, well, we're going to offer our gold at $30 off of what the market is, and then everybody has to bring their prices down, because what's going to happen? You run a state bullion depository, and the state is, defining how you can interact in the market. Everybody's going to go to what the state does. And it goes back to my earlier point that the people marry the money of the state. So if the
Right.
state is defining money outside of gold and silver, to Stuart's point, that can be dangerous, especially the transmission mechanisms, and especially for people that may be rent seeking or trying to get a specific outcome with their legislation. And now I want to go back to Stuart. One of your concerns, Stuart, involve government, but it's a different angle. It's not that government is running the systems, it's that the government's not taking gold and silver. So even with the legislation we have now, is gold and silver truly money in the system if the government's not forced to take it, as it should be, from the Constitution? What are your views on that, Stuart? I know the legislation, Daniel said last time, the 11 states, none of them were forced to accept gold and silver. We talked about, because there's fiscal notes, there's a cost to it. Where do we get? Are we going the wrong way with this, Stuart? How do we turn this around? What do we need to do to ensure that governments are getting involved in accepting gold and silver to actually make it the money of the land, instead of just focusing on controlling the actual process?
Well, to me, the states with these legal, I'm happy that the states and the state lawmakers are looking at gold and silver's money, okay, and looking at what legal tender should be. But the problem, as I see it, is that the states are trying to sidestep or walk a fine line with the federal government, okay? And that's where the rub is right there. They're not going all in on gold and silver as they should be, okay? They're trying to walk this fine line because the central government, the federal government, has way too much control and power over the states. When this country was founded, the states had much more power, okay? And that's how the Constitution tender article was written. That's how it was written and why it was written, because the states had more power. The states have subordinated their power to the federal government. And that's the big issue as I see it. I'm a sound money advocate, okay? But I'm also a small government advocate. And the federal government has gotten too big and powerful. And the states have lost the ability to challenge the federal government. And they need to get their act together and start to challenge the federal government. That's the key as I see it. I also have concerns about implementation of these legal tender laws, That to me is the whole issue. And Kim raised some of them, and I raised some last time. but the implementation is going to be critical on this. And that's why I think it's imperative that all the sound money advocates get together and iron this out, and make the legislation as good as possible. Kim and I, when we talked last month about this, after I published my Substack article on the legal tender laws, I mentioned that whenever money's involved, you know, people are driven by profit motives and incentives, and it may not be sound money. It may not be in the best interest of the overall sound money picture. And
Yeah.
that to me is the underlying thing. We need sound money for everyone, not just for the people that want to take advantage of the mechanisms of it, or to get an edge on somebody, or get state funds to implement these programs. And that's what you have going on now, this push and pull between those that want sound money for everyone and those who want to profit from the mechanisms of setting up this new system.
Yeah.
Well, and there's a word for it. It's called rent seeking. And even though gold has been money for multi-millennia, there's sort of a resurgence of this interest. Like I call it among the regular people, not you guys who, are really in this space, have been for a long time. But the regular people are looking at this. And what's amazing to me, or shocking to me, is it's actually the argument that the government has not been a good steward of money and monetary systems and financial systems. Therefore, let's ask the government to take over this one. And it just doesn't make any sense. But the gold market, or the precious metals world, is kind of acting like a new market in a lot of ways, like a new industry in a lot of ways. And of course, we have 200 plus years of history where this has been affected by the government. But when you have an emerging industry, there absolutely are people paying attention that are figuring out ways they can make the buck on it. And creating an exclusive government program with an exclusive government contract, which, by the way, let's be very, very clear on 2 points. If you're a company out there and you're salivating about that contract might be yours and therefore you support this legislation, go study history. And would you support it if you knew you're not getting the contract? But number 2, let's be very clear to a point Daniel made. A public-private partnership is still a governmental program. No matter if you outsource it 100% to a private provider, it is still a public governmental function. So in every case, again, there's the privacy issue, there's the skewing the markets issue, the rent seeking, and then the regulatory capture that naturally follows. The first company up in the treehouse pulls up the ladder through regulation to make sure nobody else comes into this market. So we really are, the precious metals market, kind of acting again like sort of a new industry. There are opportunists out there, and we are seeing it. We saw it so much. And I'm not sure that a lot of the supporters understand what this really does. So the Sound Money Trade Association has our work cut out for us to make sure we help businesses understand, your state senator, your state house rep may be looking to support something that's going to put you out of business or is going to compete very unfairly with you. And I'm a former Utah house rep, so I've seen the playbook, and we have some work to do. So we hope to have a lot more industry partners join so that we're not fighting alone. Daniel and I were frequently some of the only 2 people in committee hearings. 𝙃𝙀𝙍𝙀𝙍, he's been in the space of advocating for sound money principles too. So, but still, it can't be the 3 of us.
Yeah.
So.
And to that point, and to Stuart's point, there are companies going out there that are lobbying for their own self-interest, for profit. And Citizens for Sound Money and now the Sound Money Trade Association are the only 2 nonprofit organizations that have no product, have no interest in profit. We literally we survive, we exist from the donation of our members at the Sound Money Trade Association. I say our members because Citizens for Sound Money, we chartered it, but the board is independent. It is completely independent organization. We just have a charter because we saw a need that the industry itself, not us and them join us and we represent them, but the industry themselves need an organization to represent the interests of the sound money movement, and it's in our preamble and charter. And the Citizens for Sound Money, our only role is advisory to make sure they don't violate sound money principles and the sound money preamble that we put in there, which was to push sound money legislation for the benefit of the whole industry and citizens. So, that is the work that we've been doing. Jim Forsyth, I mean, he started this because he got involved with Ron Paul and the whole sound money movement, and Stuart would agree, and you, Rob, and Kim, we're really pushing this because of freedom and liberty. Gold is freedom, silver is freedom, because it's not money controlled by the coercive power of the government. When the government takes the money and then gets rid of its value and turns into fiat, it's a completely subjugated system. And that is why it's not just important for the store of value and giving people the choice between storing their economic energy, as I call it, and something that will hold their value so they can retire and not worry about that their pension fund or Social Security isn't keeping up with the cost of living, because this right here, this metal, will continue to keep up with the amount of currency. It's like a little sponge itself. The more currency that's printed, it keeps up with it. But we're pushing because of the 78-year-old woman that I encountered in Missouri who had to come out of retirement because she can't survive or eat unless she drives Uber. I'm out there pushing because of the 94-year-old woman who told me next time I talk to mention that she's running out of money because the inflation and the cost of living has gone up. The single mother up in New Hampshire who needs to work 3 jobs. 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. They don't know why, and the reason why is unjust weights and measures of the fiat currency and the fiat economy. And this is the only just weight and measure. Silver is the only just weight and measure to protect ourselves from the theft of government.
One thing I want to
Let's
throw
just
out
keep
there,
the government out.
yeah, hopefully not to make this too long, but there's something I think we have to talk about, because there are others in the sphere of money that really want to go the technocratic route. So I want to talk just a few minutes about digital IDs and CBDCs and stablecoins. Now, whether or not you believe the U.S. is going to go the stablecoin route or the CBDCs, electronic money seems to be the focus of the state and some of these supranational agencies like the IMF and BIS, and the BIS specifically developing the CBDC network around the world. And it seems like a lot of the countries around the world are adopting that. Is there a race condition, or is there a concern about how quickly we can coalesce in the sound money movement to effectively fight off the technocrats that want to tie electronic money to basically your voice, your biometric traits, and then really have more control over that money? I heard you, Kim, earlier talk about privacy. It seems like that system that technocrats want would be the antithesis of having private and sound money. What are your guys, and I'm just going to leave this open for anybody, what are your guys' views on digital money, digital IDs, and that system that the governments of the world seem to be infatuated with right now?
Well, it's precisely why I'm skeptical of all electronics and digital forms of money. I can't unsee a digital future, but I'm most skeptical about it because I think eventually it's all going to go in the same direction, where we're going to be under a complete surveillance state. And I don't really see any way around that unless we keep physical gold and silver and its equivalent like goldbacks or something in circulation. And the lady at Solari Report, help me with the name.
Catherine Austin
Yes,
Fitz.
she talks about that all the time, that we have to keep physical currency floating. And that's why I mentioned last time we spoke about my concern with Florida not, being willing to accept physical gold and silver. And Daniel suggested because there's an expense involved. But I think we can't lose sight of the importance of physical money.
Mhm.
A nuance on that. The state of Florida wouldn't accept physical because there's a cost. And I pushed for physical gold and silver. Rob and I and Larry Hilton from the United Precious Metal Association, we wanted everything to be legal tender. It's just that the drafters of the legislation in the Senate office put that provision that effectively made nothing legal tender. And when it comes to electronic currency, we had a seminar in Missouri training people on how to use gold and silver in their businesses and personally. And it's in the middle of Missouri. People don't trust electronic. And the choice is, look, if you don't want to use electronic, that's your choice. But you can't stop unstoppable force. That is the direction the whole world is going. We're going into an electronic age. Now, there is technology out there that you can install on any platform that uses quantum random numbering to encrypt your personal data and even could encrypt communications on cell phones, text messages, and transactions. I just interviewed on our channel, Sound Money Matters, William Browning. He's the CEO of 𝙃𝙊𝙇𝙊𝙁. They have patented technology that they can use to basically make all transactions private, and only you have access to the data and so forth. So there is technology. They're working with some major companies now to implement that technology to make electronic transfers private. And there are privacy coins now. You have Zcash, you have Monero. I mean, the privacy aspect, and you also had privacy blockchains. So privacy is a desired commodity. And in the DeFi world, you can actually put, eventually, you'll be able to put your gold and silver transactions into the decentralized finance world, find a privacy blockchain, and then transact in a private way. It's just that technical knowledge you're going to have to learn. The solutions are there to have private transactions, and that's one of the things I was trying to convey to Catherine Austin Fitz. I was on a Solari report and I was texting. I was trying to get a meeting with her because all the things that her team said about electronic currency, there's already solutions for privacy. There is not one thing that anyone in that stage said that there isn't a solution for privacy. So
Yeah, I'm going to push back on that because you put it in the government's hands, and privacy and security are just, like Stuart said, are going to be ongoing issues. But the very nature of government being public, like that is, it's the legal nature of what government is. It is public. And there's even a couple states that in their legislation required reports of the transactions of these governmental depositories to be reported annually to their Secretary of State, to be recorded quarterly to their legislature. Seriously.
yeah,
So the nature of government is it documents and it reports and
it controls, and it
it
tries to control
controls.
every aspect of our lives.
And by the way, Congress this year has been reviewing Operation Choke Point, where entities were debanked, and that government had the ability to go into private banking and strangle businesses, including, Goldback had our own experience, and then some of you know others. So you put this kind of information in the hands of government with the power of the government. Government doesn't do good things with those kinds of things, and so you're never going to convince me that there is some absolute private way of the government handling my financial transactions. I don't even want to go there.
That's
The
not what I was
government-
talking about.
the federal government
You're
can't even-
you're conflating two different things. I'm talking about the private sector solution to hide your transactions and make it private. There are solutions out there. I'm not talking.
But we're talking about
with you.
Florida, and we're talking about Florida, and Florida now is creating a government-based, a government-facilitated electronic transfer system. No,
Right. That's not what
let's
I'm
don't
talking
go
about.
there.
I think we would all agree that we would rather have private solution for electronic, and also
Right.
working for a company like Kinesis that does electronic and physical. We do both. I'm personally on the physical side. I run the bullion store here in the U.S. I would agree with Stuart at its base that I always want a physical option because I think the physical option allows you to transact most privately. If I take, I wish I had one right here. If I had a coin and I hand it to Stuart and we're doing a private transaction, the government can't see that, you know, unless I'm standing under one of their spy satellites or something. I mean, it affords you a certain level of privacy. Even cash, even fiat cash, as much as we hate it, allows you a certain amount of anonymity. But to edify Daniel's point, and so a point I've always made, you're going to have some sort of electronic version of it, or what happens to the efficiency of your economy? Amazon goes away. All the planning around moving product around the world to get the product that you want is going to go away, and we're going to go back a step in terms of the products and services that we can buy from a practical standpoint. So, good points here on both sides that we don't want government running electronic currencies. Maybe they are permissive of private solutions, and the private entities are the one that facilitate that. So they're protected by the government saying, yes, we're putting it in law that you can have an electronic solution. And oh, by the way, we're forcing the ability of people to also have a physical solution if they want. And by the way, we're not going to regulate the private solution other than to say, you know, other than to say if somebody really gets scammed, they can take it to court, but we're not going to peer into those transactions. I think that,
And we're not going to do it ourselves
and
as
they're not going to
government
do
and
it
take it
themselves. I
over.
think
Right.
we've all agreed that we don't want the government running the monetary systems. We want the government edifying the fact that we have sound money, you know, in the system. And so I'm going to end up with the last question here for all of you guys. We'll just go roundtable on it, and we'll start with Stuart. What are next steps in your mind that would solidify the privacy of the people, solidify sound money that doesn't lead to inflation, solidify sound money that prevents the government from running away with all the things that they like to do, not only control, but the wars and things like that? What do you think are next steps, Stuart, in your eyes to ensure the rights of the people, given where we are now?
Well, I come back to what we were just talking about. We have to have a physical mechanism to exchange money.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have that. And we have to be skeptical of government and every move that it makes in this space. We have to be vigilant in watching that our rights and our Constitution are not undermined. Who would trust a federal government that can't even do a comprehensive and authentic audit of its own gold holding?
They
Come
can't.
on.
Another thing
I mean-
Catherine Austin Fitts pointed out, they can't, Defense Department can't pass an audit.
And regardless, the government doesn't have the manpower to enforce what they claim they're going to enforce. How many laws have been passed by the state and federal governments that are ignored and unenforced? So keep the government out as much as possible. Yes, it's great that these state lawmakers are looking at the Constitution again and confirming or affirming that gold and silver are money and should be used as legal tender. But that's about the extent of it as I see it.
All right, we'll go next to you, Daniel, and then we're going to end with the chairwoman. What are your thoughts, Daniel?
I think we need to continue pushing and making all gold and silver legal tender. And like Missouri is the model legislation for the world in this, specifically this country. It is the most permissive physical legal tender language laws in the country and the world. Anything, even if it has 1% gold, if it's an ingot or round or bar, it's legal tender in Missouri. It's the best state for sound money. Goldbacks are legal tender. A bar that only has 25% is legal tender. As long as anybody chooses to accept it for payments of goods and services, and they know how to test it, it's legal tender in Missouri. And that's what we need to focus on, because physical gold and silver is freedom. On the digital side, which is something that we'll have to deal with in the future, not necessarily now, is we're going to have to also implement privacy measures, because that has to be a way that people need to be safe because of all the CBDC fears and the government reporting transactions. There are solutions today where you can put your digital gold and silver, and then the transactions are completely private in blockchain technology, in decentralized finance. That's what I was talking about. I'm 100% against the state controlling and monitoring all our transactions. That's completely wrong. But that we have to eventually in the future, because that is going to be the future, we're going to have to create privacy solutions, because because otherwise it's just going to be slavery that can continue to, because look, we do have a CBDC right now. It's called Zelle. It's called ACH. It's called the debit card. That's the CBDC. It's just electronic transfer of dollars right now. It's just not in a cryptocurrency. And they're seeing every single transaction. They're reporting everything over $10,000 cash. They're reporting any transfers over 50 grand. So we're being monitored right now. It's just CBDCs is much more nefarious because there's no physical currency at that point. So I think what we need to do is continue pushing what we're doing, making all gold and silver legal tender and getting rid of all taxation. Though they go hand in hand because you can't just make something legal tender and then you still charge tax on it. It makes no sense. They're not mutually exclusive. They're two different things. Tax law and legal tender status, they have to be clearly defined in statute. So we just keep pushing. And then in the
I
future,
agree with that 100%, by the way. And that's a fine point that a lot of people don't understand, because I think the movement in its early stages was looking at capital gains and sales tax before it looked at legal tender status. But there's a reason why legal tender is also an important part in there. So that's a very good point. I'm sorry, keep going.
No, and I was just going to close with electronic currency. We'll tackle that once it becomes more of a prominent thing. There is organizations around and really companies, they're all for-profit companies pushing for electronic currency and making it legal tender. Well, that's wrong. If you treat it as legal tender, that's a nuance. That's okay. But just don't let the state run it. I don't want a state bullion depository competing. If they want to hold their own gold and silver and a state-run vault, fine. But if they want to compete against the private sector that does it more efficiently and they can pop up vaults, with a few $100,000 and buying an old bank or putting it in a building, a warehouse, let the free market do that. There's an incentive for them to make money. They're always more efficient. There's a book called The Myth of the Robber Barons, and it compares free market solutions like railroads and oil companies and ferries that did not take government funds and those that did take subsidies. And the ones that took subsidies started wasting money and were less efficient. And instead of having a straight line for a railroad, the subsidized railroads went up and down and had 3 times more mileage.
And the
than
modern
the
day
private
example of that is the railroad project in California that will never end. We're going to
Yes.
get to trillions of dollars and it will never end.
In Florida, the Bright
That's-
Line is a private solution. They're barely making a profit, but they're running, and they call it the death train because of where it goes. But that's a different safety solution. But they made it. We have one of the most advanced high-speed rails in Florida, completely privatized, and you got the boondoggle in California that was completely funded by the government, and they can't get anything done. They're just
This
wasting.
is economics.
Yeah.
Economics
All right. Kim, we're going to end
101.
with you. What are your thoughts to end us up? Where do we need to, where would you like to see us go? I mean, you in Utah, you were involved in politics. So what do you see as a solution?
So I have a plug for the Sound Money Trade Association. It's just coming together. It's so needed because, like I said, we were playing whack-a-mole all across this country. We thought there were about 5, then a few more popped up, and then we thought there were 10. And even recently, in the last couple months, we became aware of other ones that tried to, maybe this was buried in some other types of bills. So we need to build advocacy muscle, really. So this association coming together, it's the Sound Money Trade Association. So we need first of all, we need more gold industry participants to join and work with us. And so we can go out and educate people. But for Rob, for your listeners, if you're in the gold industry, contact either me or Daniel. I'm just Kim@goldback.com. And while we are our own company, our focus in our membership with the association is very broad. It's all players. It's not just looking out for the particular thing we do. We want to grow the whole movement and create a better regulatory landscape, the tax benefits, removing tax barriers, and then establishing the legal tender piece. But there's a threat to it right now. So we're going to need individuals to contact their lawmakers. So as we pull plans together for things like this, we'd love to involve the public as well as industry participants. So Daniel, if you can include somewhere our contact information, I'm happy to to help
Absolutely.
people know where they can engage on the advocacy piece. Or else they, there's likelihood, given the number of states this happened in, it likely happened in your state. And you want your lawmakers to know how you feel about it, if that is moving forward, or may have already passed in Florida, and Texas as examples. So, but other states, you can expect it to come back. It's a big rent seek. So you can expect to see this in your state next year. So we need help pushing back on the current threat while we are moving forward a favorable landscape for the precious metals markets.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to end up with my own comments on this. And I think I said this on the last video in a little monologue. It's very important that you have to ante up and get involved in your state. And I think, Daniel, for the education of going down to Florida and getting involved in that process and kind of seeing how the sausage is made and seeing that, because it's forever etched on my mind, the lessons learned, and then people coming in over the top and trying to grab, what we were doing for 2 years and kind of take it for their own benefit. That's something, unfortunately, that happens a lot in the political sphere. And the only way to stop it is to mobilize people in each state to stand up to it. I think the trade association is a really good start. Citizens for Sound Money overall is a really good start, but we need everybody to participate. We need Stuart writing articles, it kind of as a watchdog, a watchman, watching what's going on, reporting on that, suggesting improvements. And we need people to get involved in that. It's not just enough to watch the video and understand it for yourself, or even to try to tell your neighbor down the street. Sometimes you got to get up off your keister and go down to the state house and say, hey, this is what happened over here. We don't want that, and just putting in your 2 cents in person can have such a tremendous effect. What we saw in Florida was there are a lot of lawmakers that really are interested in this and want to do the right thing. And even though everything didn't come out 100% the way we wanted, we moved the ball down the field, right? We did a good job. We just need to continue to focus on that. And not only in Florida, but in all these other states. And as Kim said, watch out for the rent seekers, watch out for the wolves in sheep clothing that appear to be for the people, but maybe more for themselves. That does happen quite a bit. And that's something that hopefully the trade organization can bring this community together in a way in which we can fight, that process. So thank you, everybody, for joining the roundtable. I'll put everybody's contact information down in the description, and we'll get a Substack article out on this as well, so people can see it in written form. Thank you guys for joining.
Thank you.
Be with you.